absorb what we sang about, so thank you very much. So Christian Larson in The Pathway of Roses says, the largeness and immensity of the supreme spiritual life within us comes forth only as consciousness is spiritualized. And we gain spiritual consciousness by living and thinking constantly in that lofty state where we actually feel that God is closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. So please look at the screen or in the front of your program and let's speak out loud our affirmation for January, aware of the creative power of God working through us. I see the good of God in myself and others and in all things, as I pronounce every experience good and of God. Error disappears and only the good remains. Thank you.
So as you might guess from the reading, we're talking about consciousness today. And this month, January, we're reviewing the first 4 chapters of the Science of Mind text. January, of course, the first month. It's good to go back to our roots, just as it's good for us to take the roots class and steep into the philosophy and the belief system that we espouse and that we practice. So the first 4 chapters of the Science of Mind text are the thing itself, the way it works, what it does, and how to use it. And last week, we learned a new word. Does anybody remember what that word was? Yes, Sherry?
Pronoia.
Pronoia. I know you were very excited about that word and spent much time on the internet researching it. So pronoia, if you recall, is, what is pronoia? It's the powerful belief that the universe is conspiring for our good. The powerful belief that the universe is conspiring for our good. And this is just a beautiful antidote to what we can fall into, which is paranoia. And maybe some people are feeling a little paranoid right now. There's this contrast, this very strong contrast that's taking place across the planet right now. And it can lead to that. And we are here to step back into pronoia, and know that all is conspiring for our good. That's stepping into faith and trust. So the theme for today's message is developing the consciousness to see the absolute and spiritual truth in everything. And I mean everything. And these are really unstable times. These are really volatile times. And we have been advised by mystics and sages for a very long time that this is coming. And here we are. Here we are. So maybe some of us were not prepared. Maybe we didn't know what to expect. I know for me, I thought I was prepared, and now that I'm feeling it, I wasn't as prepared as I thought, I have to admit, because I have felt rocked and shaken and confused and a little bit of disbelief. But the beautiful thing about coming together in community like this is that we have the opportunity to come back to that place of truth, come back to that place of centeredness, and know and move and act from the higher consciousness. So the terms that we are going to be talking about today are first consciousness, then the absolute, and then spiritual truth, and see how they play out in our lives. So consciousness, what I feel that so many of us are experiencing now, is the human consciousness. I call it the human, even though there's no separation. You know, we live in a reality or sub-reality of a reality that we create, of separation, of duality, of polarities. And yet there is a universal in which that activity, that experience is taking place. So we have the human consciousness, which is activated by our thoughts, by our feelings, by our beliefs, by our values, by our attitudes, by our words, by our actions, and by our reactions. It's how we experience life through our senses. And interestingly, last Friday night, in this movie, it came to light for all of us that many cultures consider thought, thinking, a sense. So just plant that little seed in your mind, because it is through all of our senses that the thought takes action, takes its information, and then that colors everything that we experience in our lives and how we respond or react to life as well. So we have the human consciousness, and it's showing up very, very powerfully as polarities today. And that is because we live in a polar experience. We have dark and light, and hot and cold, and all the things, right and wrong, and anger and peace. We have all of these emotions that we don't quite yet have been able to bring together into a cohesion, a cohesive experience of balance. And yet, consciousness, the universal consciousness, dictates and tells us and supports us in the truth that, in fact, there is no separation. All is free and possible within the one reality. And because we have freedom, we can choose our thoughts. So Dennis Merritt Jones says this: our consciousness is our mental awareness. It is both the conscious and the subconscious, and all it contains. In essence, our consciousness is simply the sum total of everything we have ever believed and accepted to be the truth about ourselves from the moment we were born until this moment in time. So that's what we're talking about, the human experience. So I'm going to ask Dan to go ahead and work up that little video, and I'm going to go on, because we're going to talk now about the superconsciousness, because we have the opportunity. We don't want to live in discord, disharmony, confusion. None of us want that. What we want is peace and joy, light and love, cooperation, creativity, expansion, harmony. And does everybody agree with me? Yeah. All right. So, but what are we experiencing right now? And what do we experience, within our own lives? Right? What are they? What are some of the things you experience? Disconnected. Yeah. A lot of fear.
Anxiety.
What's that?
Anxiety.
Anxiety. Uncertainty. Right. And if we keep spinning on that, if we keep focusing on that, it becomes harder and harder to pull ourselves out of that ring where everything seems to be an embattlement. So, as I say, when we come here, when we commune with a higher consciousness, then we have the opportunity to expand into a greater vision, and that is the vision of truth. Because even as discord is going on, peace is still here. It is always here, because that is the oversoul of life. That is the God principle. Are you ready already? So I have a few little illustrations of the higher consciousness. This is a 4-year-old girl. Somebody sent this to me by email yesterday. So human consciousness often resides in limitation. And then the expanded consciousness shows us that there is something larger and greater available to us at all times. If we surrender, if we open up, and if we are willing to receive. Okay, Dan, I think that's enough. We got the point.
We're humiliated now.
Yeah, we don't want to watch too much. It feels humiliating.
I have to play now? Thanks.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. I'm thinking, what have I accomplished in my life? So I had the opportunity earlier this year to attend a workshop that was delivered by Dr. Eben Alexander. I don't know if anybody else was there. Yeah, Nancy was there. That's right. So we're talking about consciousness. Now, this is like a direct download of superconsciousness. She came into this life fully open and, and fully receptive. And we know that there is no time and space in the ultimate reality. And so whatever that is about, genius of music is available. And she's the right person in the right place at the right time. So then there are other ways that consciousness works for us. And Dr. Eben Alexander is a neuroscientist and a neurosurgeon who's been in practice for 25 years. And he was very happily, living his life, taking care of lots and lots of people, and performed many brain surgeries and studied the brain as a scientist and studied consciousness. And this is what he said as a scientist. Modern neuroscience dictates that the brain gives rise to consciousness. The brain gives rise to consciousness. To the mind, to the soul, to the spirit, to whatever you choose to call that invisible, intangible part of us that truly makes us who we are. And I had little doubt that it was correct. And then one day, Dr. Alexander woke up feeling horrendously ill, an extreme headache, and pain all over his body. And he was rushed to the hospital and very quickly went into a coma, which lasted for 7 days. He was hooked up to an EEG machine, of course, and his brain showed absolutely no activity at all. So the concern was that he was brain dead, and that if he woke up, he would not have any of his faculties available to him any longer. They were about to pull the plug on the 7th day when suddenly his eyes opened up, and not only was he fully coherent, but he told a story of the adventures that he was having in an altered reality, an expanded reality, as his brain was dead to science's understanding. He had an experience of intense love. He had an awareness of God presence, and he had an experience of extreme awe. And this is what he said and wrote when he came back. I was encountering the reality of a world of consciousness that existed completely free of the limitations of my physical brain. The place I went was real in a way that makes the life we are living here and now completely dreamlike by comparison. My experience showed me that the death of the body and the brain are not the end of consciousness. He describes experiencing the company of a being who emanated an expression of love that was beyond all the different types of love we have down here on earth. It was something higher, holding all those other kinds of love within itself, while at the same time being more genuine and pure than all of them. The message he received was, you have nothing to fear. There is nothing you can do wrong. You are loved and cherished dearly and forever. So consciousness, and as I said in the opening, all experiences that we have are for us. They are for our good, and they are for our growth. And how heartening is that when we hear these extreme circumstances, we experience this amazing demonstration of infinite genius that, in fact, all is happening for the good and everything is possible. No one thought Dr. Eben Alexander had a chance at life. But what happened was that he was reborn into a new purpose. Even though he still believed in science and continued to perform operations on brains, he did so from a higher understanding that there is infinite possibility and it's available through the body and without the body. There is an expanded state of being that, in fact, we are all living in, and that is the universal consciousness. So where do we find this consciousness? And that comes to the second word, the absolute. And what is the absolute? Anybody have a guess?
God.
Absolute is God. We call it God. And in the yogic tradition, they call it good, orderly deliverance. And they also call it good, orderly direction. And they also call it generating, organizing, and destroying principle. So that there is a continuous flow generating. This was Eben Alexander, and we'll move on to the yantra, which is the image. So this is a yantra of the infinite reality. It's an image, basically, of the Om. So this is, we might call it in our language today, sacred geometry, the center point which is everywhere and the ending point which is nowhere. The limitless, infinite replay of the patterning of perfect order that is generated as divine love expressing itself. And within it, which has no beginning and has no end, is infinite possibility and potential. The presence of God is the all in all. It is the omniscience, the omnipotence, and the omnipresence. There is nothing that cannot be within this reality. You know, and I think those little demonstrations of a 4-year-old child playing a sonata with no training is a demonstration of that. So there are no limitations in truth. It is limitless, self-sufficient, eternal, pure potential, and the source of all things. It flows in, through, and as us. It is the source of our being. And this is why in the 5 steps of the spiritual mind treatment, which is our affirmative prayer, the first thing we do is reach into the absolute, the recognition that I, in my limited thinking at this moment, can open myself to the infinite possibility and know the truth and call it down into my experience. We shift our consciousness from limitation to endless possibility. That's the power of this prayer. It's a beautiful thing. God, that place of the power where resides all power, all love, all peace, all potential for creation. And we believe that thoughts are creative. So when we go into the absolute, we have that possibility to create something completely new in our lives. So then let's define spiritual truth. It's a pretty big subject. And even though Ernest Holmes is very wordy and repeats himself in most of his writings, he made this one very simple for us. And what he said is perfect God, perfect man, woman, perfect being, The existence of all life is beingness. We are the creative expression of this reality of perfection. And it's very easy to think of God as perfect, and not so much when it comes to ourselves. But in fact, we always have that opportunity to turn to that expanded consciousness and invite in receptivity that into our lives. So I just want to offer some, again, illustrations of how this takes place in our daily lives. And if we are keen, if we are awake, then we can understand that that is what's happening. When we are asleep, we don't get the benefit of the expansiveness, the gratitude when it's happening, and maybe don't even recognize the power of it to be used by ourselves. So there's a story of William Edmondson, who worked as a janitor most of his life, and he was not malcontent. He was going along life in an orderly way. And one night he went to sleep and had a dream that God planted the seed of a sculptor in his life. And when he woke up, he could not get the thought out of his mind. So he went and he gathered some discarded limestone and got a railroad spike and a worn-out hammer and just started chiseling away at the stone. And what he revealed was not only the image of a human being that was magnificent, but he also revealed the truth of himself as a sculptor. The seed was planted for all intents and purposes. It came out of nowhere. He was receptive. He received it. And then he claimed the sacred yes. He did not say, well, how ridiculous was that? That's not going to happen. That's not who I'm a janitor. He said, wow, sculptor, huh? Let's see what happens. Let's run with this thing. And because of his intention and attention and courage to step out from what he has known his whole life and probably been told about himself, he lived a rich and full and creative life creating art. And his art supported people in another way than cleaning buildings. There's nothing wrong with cleaning buildings. But it is that creative impulse within that is present within all of us that is calling forth sometimes something larger if we're listening and then willing to make that sacred yes, that affirmation, yes, I will do this. There's also a story that I wanted to share that I read the other day. I don't know if anybody has read this book, but I highly recommend it, 7,000 Ways to Listen by Mark Nepo. And this is a story when he was growing up. He was a college student. I think he was a junior in college, and it was time for spring break. And his grandmother wrote to him. She lived in Florida, and he was at school up the East Coast. And his parents lived in the Midwest. So his grandmother wrote him and invited him to bring some of his friends down and enjoy spring break at the beaches in Florida. And he thought this was a really good idea. Of course, who wouldn't? I wish somebody would write me right now. But so he told his parents, and the response was not what he expected. So I'm actually going to read, because he is so poetic, and these are his words, and this is his story. When I told my parents They chided me not to freeload, not to take advantage of her. I thought about their position, but felt in my heart that this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to know Grandma. Though I had nothing material to offer her in return, I had nothing to bring. I felt committed to offer what little I had, my presence and my love. My parents and I grew heated about it. It was a significant parting of values. And this goes back to what I'm talking about, the limited thinking that we demonstrate in the human consciousness when we don't open up to the infinite possibility. So many rules and regulations that we impose on ourselves. So he went down with his friends, and this is what he said. During the week, we had our fun on the beach, but also entered Grandma's world. We went shopping with her, 2 of us on each arm.
Oh.
And she greeted her cronies like a matriarch whose sons had returned from a strange and silent war.
Oh.
Our last day there, near sunset, she and I walked alone along the ocean, and she went on and on about her life, her loves, and the disappointments that she had experienced. It was a privilege to hear her aging voice on the one side of me and the ocean on the other. I'll never forget that walk. It seemed as if we were suspended for the moment on this sunlit strip of sand, out of time, free of pain and worry. She had the most peaceful look on her face, and I knew then that I had come. I might cry. I'm sorry. It's put me to tears before. That I had come all this way to have this walk. Grandma not only taught me about generosity and the proper order in which things support people, but for the first time, I was able to give when I had nothing by receiving. It's a powerful message. The higher consciousness opened up and poured into this receptive being, divine unconditional love. And is that not what we're all here for? And we have to be willing not only to give, but also to receive that grace which is here for the sole purpose of our good. So there's just one last illustration that I wanted to share. And there's a beautiful slide here. I don't know if you can tell exactly what it is, but this is the image of a forest. So I heard the other day, let me see if I can find her name here. I heard a TED Talk by Suzanne Simard, who is a forest ecologist in Vancouver, Canada. And she was working for a large lumber company, and they were clear-cutting the trees, extensively. I've actually seen that out there, where just like swaths of the forest have just disappeared, and it's just like a huge wound on the earth, and that sounds dramatic, but in fact, in her study, it's really true. So she became disenchanted with her work, and she was a scientist and a forest ecologist. So she decided to do a study with the trees, and what she did was inject radioactive isotopes of a different quality in different trees over an expansive area, and she would concentrate on one small area and inject these different trees with these different isotopes. And this took place in many, many, many areas across many miles. And what she found was that the question was, do trees communicate? And what she found was that the isotopes that were delivered to one tree were showing up in other trees. And the one that was delivered in this tree was showing up as a response back to that tree. And then in further study, what she found was that there's this matrix of fungi under the soil with tentacles or strings that come out, creating a mass network of communication for the entire forest to talk to each other. And there would be hub trees or mother trees, which were very strong and had a history and a knowledge and an awareness of the environment and the climate. And when a young tree was not getting enough sunlight, it would call for more carbon or some nutrient, and she would release that into the trees. So it is, when we talk about a universal consciousness, science, this is the good part of science. It's showing us, allowing us to see what we cannot see and know what we cannot know until we do. But the truth is that this infinite possibility is available to us at all times. And when we make ourselves receptive to it, who knows what we can bring forth on this planet? And we are a demonstration of that same interconnectedness that we don't see very clearly. We keep trying to create separation from each other, when in fact, we and the trees are all one organism. And when we talk about divine balance in the universal consciousness, that's what we're talking about. And we are here to demonstrate in the microcosm the reality of that macrocosm, because that's who we are. So I just invite you, just want to close with this quote by Christian Larson, which I find hopeful, helpful, and empowering. The cosmic world, and maybe you want to close your eyes to just take it in. The cosmic world, or the universal consciousness, is that highly refined, spiritualized world all about us and within us, permeating everything, encompassing everything. The great divine sea in which we live and move and have our being. A world of pure light, gorgeous splendor, and celestial brilliancy. The cosmic world is the world sublime. It is everywhere, and we live in it now and eternally. But only those who are spiritually awakened can discern its reality and behold the shining glories of its fair transcendent realms. When the true spiritual awakening begins, we discover the cosmic world, the universal consciousness, and we enter into it. The heavens are opened, and the vision before us reveals splendors and glories that tongue can never describe. Joy that cannot be measured, and life that is a million heavens in one. So let's just breathe that in. And I just invite each and every one of us to take that image, that truth, that faith, that trust that's revealed right here and now to each of us into the life, this life, as we go forward from this day. And so it is.
And so it is.